Simon Helberg's story looks like a straight-line success. A trained actor. A hit sitcom. 12 seasons. Over 15 million viewers per episode at its peak. From the outside, it looks effortless. But underneath that clean narrative is something far messier. A life shaped by abandonment, addiction, rejection, and invisible battles that fame never quite fixed. Before we talk about the man, we need to talk about the character. Because understanding Howard Wolowitz changes how you see everything that came after. For 279 episodes, Howard was the joke. The loud one. The flirt who always struck out. The guy still living with his mother well into his 30s, wearing a bowl cut and a different belt buckle every week. Audiences laughed, and they were supposed to. But strip away the laugh track, and what you're left with is one of the most quietly damaged characters on television. It all traces back to one thing. Howard's father walked out when he was still a child. The show never gives a clean explanation. It doesn't need to. The damage is everywhere. The insecurity. The compulsive need for attention. The constant joking that never quite reaches his eyes. Psychologists consistently link parental abandonment to anxiety, low self-esteem, and deep fear of rejection, and Howard checks nearly every box. But here's what makes it stranger. The show almost never addresses it directly. The closest it gets is a season 6 episode where Howard receives a letter connected to his father. The writers deliberately withhold what's inside. Multiple possibilities are shown. None are confirmed. The mystery stays unresolved because the writers understood something important. The wound was the point. No answer could undo what had already been done. And then there's his mother. Loud. Unseen. Beloved by fans. Debbie Wolowitz existed almost entirely as a voice echoing from another room, played for laughs, always. But what it actually depicts is a grown man who never fully left childhood. She cooked for him, cleaned for him, worried about him constantly. And he stayed. Not because he was lazy, but because she was the one person who never left. That kind of bond doesn't just look like dependency. It is dependency, and it's completely understandable when you know where it comes from. What looks like confidence in Howard is almost never confidence at all. The jokes, the impressions, the outrageous flirting, the magic tricks, it's armor. Psychologists describe humor as one of the most common defense mechanisms humans use to redirect pain into something more socially acceptable. Howard almost never speaks openly about loneliness or fear. He just keeps performing. And when you understand why, the comedy stops being quite so funny. Now here's where the story gets more complicated. Because the man playing Howard was carrying weight of his own. Simon Helberg was born in Los Angeles on December 9, 1980, into a family that understood hardship at a historical scale. His paternal grandparents, Sam and Tonya Helberg, were Holocaust survivors, part of the small fraction of European Jews who endured systematic persecution between 1939 and 1945 and rebuilt their lives by emigrating to the United States afterward. That history doesn't disappear in a generation. It shapes the one that follows. His father, Sandy Helberg, was an actor and writer, which meant Simon grew up close to the entertainment industry, close enough to see exactly how unpredictable it was. His parents actively discouraged him from treating acting as a reliable career. They had seen the unemployment cycles, the short-lived roles, the years of nothing. They weren't wrong to worry. Helberg trained at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, a program built to produce working actors rather than overnight stars. And after graduation, the reality of the industry arrived in full force. Guest spots, sketch appearances, small roles that led to smaller roles. By most accounts, he attended somewhere around 1,000 auditions before landing the role that would define his career. 1,000 times sitting across from a casting director who had already seen 40 other people that day, waiting for feedback that almost never came. Psychologists who study performance careers have a name for what that does to a person. They call it self-evaluation strain, the point where repeated rejection stops feeling like a lost opportunity and starts feeling like a verdict on who you are. Every failed audition carries 2 losses, the job and a quiet chip in how you see yourself. Most people would have stopped. He didn't. Then, in 2007, everything changed. The Big Bang Theory premiered on CBS on September 24th, filmed at Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank. Howard Wolowitz was not designed as a lead. He was part of an ensemble. But the show grew faster than almost anyone expected, eventually becoming one of the most watched scripted comedies in American television history. The 1,000 rejections suddenly had a punchline. What nobody saw coming was what came next, not for the show, but for his family. While Simon's career was accelerating, his younger brother Mason was moving in the opposite direction. A musician and audio engineering student at the Musicians Institute in California, Mason's path gradually became defined not by ambition, but by addiction. In 2014, he faced charges related to possession of controlled substances. He failed to appear for a court hearing. A warrant was issued. These details, dry as they read, are the outer edge of something much harder, a private family crisis playing out invisibly while Howard Wolowitz was delivering punchlines to studio audiences every week. The situation worsened. Mason later described what he called a very bad substance addiction, severe enough to leave him homeless in California's San Fernando Valley. Homelessness is rarely a sudden collapse. It's what happens after employment goes, then finances, then relationships, then the support systems that held everything together. He was arrested again in 2020. That arrest, however, became a turning point. Mason entered a faith-based residential recovery program called Victory Outreach Men's Home and began the slow, non-linear work of rebuilding. For Simon, none of this was abstract. Addiction doesn't stay contained to one person. It moves through families, through anxiety, financial uncertainty, shifting roles, and the particular helplessness of watching someone you love move through cycles you can't control. In sibling relationships especially, there is closeness without authority. You feel everything and can fix very little. Simon was becoming one of the most recognizable faces in American comedy, and simultaneously living with the private weight that fame doesn't touch. But the external pressures weren't the only ones he was managing. Even at the height of the show's success, Helberg has spoken openly in interviews about struggling with obsessive-compulsive tendencies and anxiety, not as a past phase he grew out of, but as ongoing experiences that persisted alongside his growing fame. OCD affects roughly 1 to 2% of the global population and involves intrusive thoughts and repetitive behaviors that don't respond to logic or reassurance. For Helberg, this manifested as self-monitoring and internal pressure that continued regardless of how well things were going externally. And that's the part that surprises people. The show was a hit. The audience was enormous. The work was consistent. By every visible metric, things were going exceptionally well. Yet Helberg has described periods of being genuinely overwhelmed. Performance psychologists call this achievement anxiety, the phenomenon where success doesn't quiet self-doubt but actually intensifies it, because every successful performance raises the stakes of the next one. Over 12 seasons, over 279 episodes, that pressure accumulates. It doesn't reset. He sought therapy and, by his own account, medication to help manage these experiences. For someone whose entire public identity was built on comedic precision and confident delivery, the private reality was almost the exact inverse: careful management of thought patterns that the audience never saw and the laugh track never reflected. When the show finally ended on May 16, 2019, the challenge shifted again. 12 years as Howard Wolowitz leaves a mark that doesn't wash off easily. Casting directors think in patterns. Audiences remember what they've seen most often. A character appearing across 279 primetime episodes over more than a decade doesn't just become familiar. It becomes the lens through which the actor is seen. In industry terms, this is typecasting. In practical terms, it means that the very thing that made him successful also became the wall he had to climb over to do anything else. There was also the complicated ending. When reports emerged in 2018 that Jim Parsons had decided not to continue, media coverage quickly reduced 12 years of ensemble television to a single person's departure. Helberg and other cast members later expressed frustration with how that narrative flattened the collective effort behind the show. It's a small thing compared to everything else, but it's the kind of erasure that stings when you've spent over a decade building something together. What Simon Helberg's story actually contains, when you lay it out in full, is not a clean Hollywood arc. It's a sequence of things that existed simultaneously and never fully resolved each other. A family history rooted in survival. A brother's years-long struggle with addiction. 1,000 rejections before a single breakthrough. Internal battles that fame neither caused nor cured. A character so iconic it became a cage as much as a career. These things sit beside each other. None of them cancel the others out. And that, more than any single dramatic moment, is what makes the story worth knowing.